Alright, now let's take a look at this problem and see how we can solve it. The problem says, write a program that allows the user to enter as many marks as they want. Each mark should be between 0 and 100. And when the user is finished entering the marks by pressing enter without typing any number, the program should first calculate the average of the marks and then displays whether the student passes or fails based on the average. These hints will constitute like your algorithm set of instructions that you can follow in order for you to solve the problem. First of all, use a loop to keep asking for the marks until the user presses enter without typing anything. That means really that gives us a very good idea on the nature of the loop that we are going to use. This loop should be a perpetuate loop, meaning it should be always true until the user breaks it within the loop, like with their entry. Then use double.tryPass, and this function we'll discuss it later. This function basically will return true or false, and then if it's true, then it will allow you to add the result into a variable inside the function to check if the input is valid. If it's not, then prompt the user again. Keep track of the total sum of marks and the number of marks entered. At the end of the loop, calculate the average using this formula, and then last but not least, use an if-else statement to determine if the average is greater than or equal 50 or less than 50, which means the student has failed. Alright, but before I really jump to the application and start programming this and solving the problem, I would like to give you one good clue, one good trick that we use as programmers, as C# programmers, to kind of elude our way into writing the exact data types of the variables. I've taught you the identical way, which is, by the way, the best way to write the data types and the variables, to declare the variables, which is, first of all, you add the data type, integer, double, string, boolean, character, whatever, and then the variable's name, and then of course the initial value. Let's apply this to double as well. Number 2 equal 9.7. we have float, okay, we forgot the semicolon, don't do that. We have the float number 3 equals 10.5 f, and then we have the string name equals Michael, and so on and so forth. Really, you can add the character, the boolean, letter equals a, then we have the bool, value equal true, whatever you want to add. Now, if you weren't really sure about the data type, you can just add var, and what this will do is that the compiler will decide for you what this variable, or what the data type of this variable, what this variable belongs to, okay, based on the compiler, based on the most suitable or fit name for your variable. Okay, so this one is integer, this one is double, this one is single, which is the same as float, this one is string, this one is a letter or a character, and this one is boolean. Okay, but what this will do, actually, it will add more complexity to the compiler, it will add more load to the compiler, because the compiler now has to decide for you what is the most suitable data type for your variable. Alright, so with that being said, let's start declaring the variables that we are going to use in our program, and we should be able to decide whether they will stay or they will live outside the scope of the loop or inside the scope of the loop. If we want the variable to be declared often, or like in iterative way, then we should declare them inside the loop. But if we want them to be declared just once and then we use them inside the loop, then we declare them outside the loop. Okay, so for the sum, we'll give it 0, and since the marks can take the nature of double, so 0.0 to transfer this from integer to double, now it's double. Okay, and we have the average as well, which will be of double type. And what else? We have the count, because we have to count the marks, right? And it will just be an integer because it's just to count the marks, the number of the marks. I believe that's it for now, and let's jump to the while loop, and it will always be true, like I told you, unless the user breaks it. And inside of it, I'll declare a variable called input, and I'll make it console.readline so the user can enter this number or this value. But bear in mind that this will be string now, because console.readline will only accept a string. Now if you want to parse it, you can parse it like this: double dot parse, and then, like, I'm sorry, I messed up. I meant to do this. Okay. And that will parse it. However, I want to give the user the flexibility to add anything they want, and I will refine them using my defensive programming. And I also would like to give the user the ability to add nothing, which is just to press enter to exit out of the program. And also I'll tell the user, please enter a mark or press enter to exit. Okay? And now I should write an if statement. If the input is null, which is nothing, if the user just presses enter, then simply just break out of the program. Else, if the input is a mark, which I'll use double dot try parse input. If it's a mark, if it's a legit mark, then what I'll do is I'll save them using out, and then I declare a variable var mark. Okay, or I can just declare double mark. It doesn't matter really. I prefer the other approach, the more straightforward approach. And then if this mark was indeed, or if this input was indeed a legit mark, meaning 8, 9, 10, 10 point something, 5 point something, a legit mark, and not just an alphabetic letter, for example A, B, C, or these are, for example, types of word, then what I'll do is I will add this to the sum, and also I'll increase the count by 1. Okay, so the sum will start with 0, and then assume the first mark is 2, then the sum will be 0 plus 2, so it will be 2. The value will be adjusted, and the second mark is 5, so it will be 2 plus 5, 7, and so on. Okay, however, if the user enters something else other than a number, like let's assume a letter or something, then I'll present to the user, this is an, or this is, yeah, an invalid input. Please enter a number. Okay, and then I will continue, meaning I'll go back again to the while loop. Alright, and by the end of it, by the end of the loop, or after the finish the end of the loop, after the end of the loop, I'll calculate the average, which is sum over count, and I'll add the averages, console.writeLine. The average is, and then I'll just this be here, and I'll use the string interpolation to add the average. Okay, and then let's decide whether the average is more than 50 or less than 50. Now if the average is more than 50 or equal 50, then consult a right line. The student has passed or has a passing mark, or yeah, has passed. It's fine. Now else the student has failed. Okay, now let's test our program. F5 to debug and start, and then please enter the mark. Let's enter 5 and then 80 and then 20. Okay, and then just enter without anything. So that says this is an invalid input, please enter a number. So it didn't really recognize this, and the reason behind this is that the input was not considered really null, even though we didn't enter anything, but it's still considered it to be a white space. So in order for us to adjust this, in order for us to resolve this problem, we need to use something called string.white space is null or white space, and then we use the input. And the reason behind that is, if I used input equals null, then in case that this was not really null, this was like maybe there was a space in between, then this will not consider to be null. It will consider to be a value in the memory. So in order for me to explicitly tell the compiler that if this was a null or a white space, meaning nothing is entered, then consider it to be null as well. Okay, let's see. 5, 20, 100. Okay, so the average is 41. The student has failed. Okay, let's try something with a passing mark, 90, 60, and then enter. The student has passed. What if I entered an alphabetic letter, like my name is John, for example? Okay, this is an invalid input. Please enter a number. And then 5, 10, and then, for example, another mistake, Khalid, and then 90, enter, and it says like 35, the student has failed. It excluded, of course, this one and that one. 9 plus 10 plus 5 is 105, over 3 is 35. Alright, that's pretty much it. Now let's jump to the assignment, the problem that you have to solve, and please use all the knowledge and write in the comments whether you faced any issues or trouble, or whether even you solved it correctly, so we can learn from one another. Thank you.